Hello friends, welcome back to this brand new video whereby we are going to learn state management in React.js. In the previous video, we learned how to set up a new React project using Vite, and we also learned the basic folder structure of React.js. Plus, we learned how you can run your React project on various devices in addition to the development machine. We discussed that when you set the server object and also set the host to true, you're able to run your React project both on your development machine and on other devices connected to the same network as the development machine. This is something very handy, especially when you want to test your user interfaces on various devices like smartphones, tablets, and of course big screens in addition to the development machine. After that, we discussed about how you can pass props from one component to the other and be able to use them, of course, from the mother component to the child component, and be able to use them alongside the data or content in the child component. Today, we are going to be concentrating on state management by discussing at something called React hooks. If you didn't watch the previous video, I highly recommend you watch it first. And if you really like these videos and would like to see more tutorials like these, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the bell icon. And if you're ready, let's get started. Alright guys, so we are going to be discussing about these 8 most commonly used hooks to do state management in React functional components. That is useState, useEffect, useCallback, useMemo, useRef, useReducer, useContext, and of course custom hooks. Basically, this is a way of writing reusable logic simultaneously using hooks to do state management. So we are going to be discussing useEffect in this very tutorial, and these other ones we are going to be discussing them in the coming videos. So for now, I will come here and I will basically elase here. So basically, useState is a React hook that allows us to add state to functional components. It's like the most commonly used hook. So we are going to be writing the syntax for the start, and this is how we actually write it. So hooks are functions, so we start by calling it just like that, but we need to assign it a variable. So we are going to say const, but this variable we are going to destructure it like this. Let's call it state, and we also need a function for updating this variable, so we are going to call it set state like this, and that's going to be a use effect like that. So in here we basically have something called initial state. This is the initial state of this very variable. We just initialize it, so it's like what the variable has initially, the value that the variable has initially. So this is basically the syntax for a useState hook. So down here we can get to write some basic code. So we are gonna say const, let's have a variable called count, and let's call the setter function set count like this. This is a function that updates the variable count in case need be. So we are gonna assign it useState like that, and then initial state. Initial state for now it's gonna be 0. Let's have it as a number. So when we do this, when you come here and hover, we are gonna say count is a number because we just initialized its state using a number which is 0. So down here we can maybe render it. Let's come here and try to render it in the user interface. Let's just say count is, maybe let's have it in a separate div and say count is count like that. Basically, this is how we get to display a variable from this upper section to the JSX section. So let's first check it out. As you can see, there is a problem. Let's refresh. Okay, there is still a problem. components main.css. There is a component we are trying to import and it doesn't exist. Let's get rid of it and come back here and try again. Let's refresh. Still there is a problem in app.js. Let's try to hard reload. I think we didn't save. Let's come back. Okay, it's here. Count is 0. Fantastic. But we need to really have some basic styles, so we can have that one very fast. We are gonna come here and say some class name. Let's call it main wrapper, like that. And down here we can just give it something like inner wrapper. It's gonna be inner wrapper, like that. And we can maybe create a new component and let's have it as main.css. And inside here we are gonna have our class of inner wrapper and main wrapper. Let's actually start with main wrapper, and we are gonna say display flex and align item center, justify content center. We are also gonna give it some width and height. Width is gonna be 100 view height, and height is gonna be 100 view height. Actually, width is 100 view width, not view height. Okay, it's perfect. Let's first check it out, but we need to connect our app in here. Let's say import /component, yes, and then main.css. Let's first check it out and see. As you can see, it's centered vertically and horizontally, which is fantastic. We also need some background. Let's come here and have the inner wrapper as well. So basically we are gonna say inner wrapper. This one here we can give it a main background of say that one, AAA. And in here we are gonna have some background color of white, just to differentiate it from the main. And we can have a width of say 50% and also a height of say 60%, like that. We also need to give it some padding of say 20 pixels, and we can actually give it some border radius as well of say 10 pixels. Let's first check it out. Okay, it's fantastic. It's here. Count is 0. We can basically get to run our use state in here so that we can write our own components that can really get us understand this with some hook. So let's come in here and proceed. We had gone as far as we can actually have this one in a separate div. You can just have it as a div and then put it just like this and save. It's actually fantastic. So this is the count. We can maybe have a button which when clicked gets to increment this count. That's when we are going to get this concept very well. So we can come here and say button. We can just say increment count, and in here we can just have it like this. We need a function which when we click the button we are going to run. So we can just say on click, we can say handle increment button or handle increment, just that's enough, or handle increment count. So we are just going to come here and say up here in the JSX section we are going to say const handle increment. It's going to be an arrow function, and in here that's where we are going to say set count. Remember, we have set count as the setter function for the variable count. So if we ever want to alter it, we use this function to be able to change it to wherever we need to. So we are going to say set count to count plus 1 to be able to increment 1. You can just update it according to your wish, but for now we are just updating it by adding a 1. As you can see, it's working perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. Maybe let's have some little styles for this button. I don't know, we can give it a different color. It could look better. Let's actually close here and just have any button that we have in here. We are gonna say background here like that, and we can maybe say color white. I'm not gonna have very complex styles because it's just majorly learning the skill of using state hook or use state hook. So basically that's all for the button. So we also need a way how we can learn to decrement this value. So basically to do that, you can just come here and alter this function, and for example say set count to count minus 5 like that. So here we've updated the count state variable to decrement 5 every time we click this button. As you can see, we need to reload. I think there was a problem. I think it hadn't reloaded the whole page very well, but it looks perfect now. We can decrement count by 5, and basically that's how we get to increment, we get to change this state variable. But of course here we are in JavaScript. React is just a JavaScript library, so we have access to all the data types in JavaScript. So this state variable here, we just initialize it as a number, but we can possibly initialize it as other data types, for example object, string, numbers, boolean, and other data types, both primitive and non-primitive data types. We have access to them all from JavaScript. So what we basically do, let's have an example where we have various data types. For example, let's say, actually this was a number. Let's come here and have a string. Let's for example say const name, set name. It's gonna be useState. Then let's have it as an empty string. If you don't have something to start with and you need your variable as a string, you can just have it as an empty string. The same thing applies to other data types like array. Let's have it here. Let's say const. Here we can say names. It is still fine. We can still use the same thing to understand it. Let's say set names, and maybe we can have it as an empty array as well initially. If you have some values to start with, it is very okay. You can pass them here. You can even pass here a variable as an initial value. For example, if you had an array in a variable, before you get here, you can get to pass it here. But for now, let's pass an empty array. We can also have an object like this. So we are gonna say const, let's say employee. I'm gonna say set employee. It's gonna be an object of details of a particular employee like that. We're gonna have it as useState. Inside here we are gonna say an empty object as well, or for now we can just have some keys. Let's say name, let's call it employee name. It's gonna be John, and maybe employee age, it's gonna be 12. We can literally have here anything. Maybe we can say employee ID, and it's gonna be 56 maybe. Okay, let's proceed and have the very last one as a boolean. They are gonna help us understand this concept very well. Let's say const is employee. We are gonna check if someone is an employee or is a normal person like a customer. So we are gonna say set is employee. By the way, this setter function doesn't necessarily have to start with the word set, but it is really a good conversion to have it like this: set employee, set names according to the first variable. But it doesn't have to be like this. You can literally call it anything, but React knows that whatever you press here is what you are gonna use to update your state variable. So let's come here and have it as useState, and inside here we are going to initialize it to false. That is, by default someone is not an employee, so he can maybe be like a customer by default, and then after something we can get to set this employee to true and then have someone as an employee. So let's come here and first get to deal with a string first. We have it like name, set name, and then use state. We can maybe have an input. It's gonna help us understand this concept very well. Let's say input, it's gonna be type text, and then the value. We are gonna use this name variable to keep track of whatever is entered here. So when we say value equals name, it's gonna be something very nice. So to get to upload, so to get to change this input, we need to keep track of whatever is changing. So we can use the onChange function, and we are gonna take an event. Then inside here, we are gonna update the name variable using its updater function, set name. And inside here, we are gonna pass whatever is entered in the input. So we are gonna say event target value like that. It's actually value. Okay, so by doing this, when we get to use this variable, we are gonna be with whatever was entered in the input. Let's get to log it here, or we can even display it. Let's have a span or another div. I think another div is better. Let's have it as name. Let's come here and enter something. As you can see, you can just say available like this. As you can see, you're able to track whatever is entered in this input. Of course, we can add some styles, but it's not very important at the moment. We really need to understand how this hook works. So whatever is entered inside here is being logged down here. So another thing we can do is we can add a button to be able to display whatever was entered here after a button click, or we can also log it in the console. It is something very nice to keep track of whatever was entered here, because it comes in handy when it comes to forms, and we are going to be handling a form in our project after getting this. After getting these basic skills on state management, we have a project which we are going to work on, and it really involves some handling form data. So basically, this is how we get to keep track of whatever was entered in the input using a useState hook. We can have here a button which, when clicked, can reveal this name, and we have the name hidden by default. I think it's something nice. So we are going to say button. We are going to say reveal name as the button text, and inside here we need an on click as well. We are going to say handle reveal text, or we can call it handle reveal name. I think since it's specifically a name, we have a typo like that. So up here we can get to handle it, reveal name handle. Let's have it like that. So we are gonna say const handle reveal name. It's gonna be an arrow function, and inside here, that's where we are gonna update our variable for being able to reveal a name. So in here, we really need to use our boolean to be able to actually also have a typo here. Boolean is double O. So we need to update our boolean, for example, to be able to keep track of if someone was an employee, we can get to reveal it. So we can have it like set employee, set is employee, and we can set him to true. Then in our JSX, we are going to be able to render this thing here conditionally if his employee is true. So to do that, we are going to come here and say if his employee is true, then we can get to reveal this one here. Remember, it is false by default, which is why when we come here, we can refresh, and let's try typing. Okay, it is still keeping track of it, so we need to hide it by default. Okay, I think we have a problem. We need to conditionally render the name, not the button. So basically we can undo a little bit. just undo and then come here and be able to render this one conditionally, not the button. It's gonna be is employee, like that. So basically when someone is an employee, that's when we are gonna be able to see this name, and that is we are updating it in here after clicking the button. And remember, is employee is initially false, so by default we are not gonna see this name. Let's come here and type Avene like that and reveal. As you can see, it's here, so it's gonna be hidden by default. By the way, in some scenarios you might need to have this thing in a different way. You sometimes need to trigger it. If it is true, it becomes false, so that if this name is being seen and you click the button, then you get to hide it. And if it's hidden and you want to see it, you can still click the same button. So to do that, you are going to come here and update the is employee variable and set it to not is employee. By doing that, when it is true, we've set it to false, and when it's false, we've set it to true. So when we come down here, we are going to say reveal name. Let's come here and say John Doe and reveal name. As you can see, John Doe is here. So when we click reveal name again, it's going to get hidden once again, because when it's true, we set it to false, and when it's false, it's true. So basically, that's how you deal with Boolean state variables and string state variables. We've so far covered three: numbers, Boolean, and string. So we can actually move on and look at something different, and that is arrays. As you can see, we have a variable called names, which is initially an empty array. So we can get to push in some things when we run some function. Of course, that is the set names. Or we can even have an independent function where we get to update these names. For example, you might have like an API call. We are going to be discussing it in the next video when we get to discuss about use effect hook. So basically how we do it, we get to update it by using the set names function and then pushing in some data. But for now, we can actually have our data inside our array. Initially, we can just say something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. We can have any data type here, just like a normal array in JavaScript. An array can possibly hold more than one data type without having any issue. So let's save here, and when we come here, we can maybe display that data, just numbers. We could have had an array of objects, an array of strings, an array of numbers. It is either way fine. So to be able to display that array in our JSX, we are going to use something called a map function. So inside here, we are basically going to say names.map. So actually, of course, inside brackets like this, actually instead of having numbers, we can get to have there some actual names as strings. Let's say John, and let's say Jane, and we can have something like Marvin. We can also have something like Avini, like that. They are actually 4 names. We could have had more, or have had an array of objects, whatever. We can use this for now to be able to understand how we deal with arrays when using useState hook. So when we use the map function, this is like the normal map on an array. So we are going to have inside here, we can call it a name. And then down here, we can use these brackets and say, we can actually use a normal component, a normal HTML element like span or like a div. Let's use a div for now. That's what we've been using. It's actually this. We're going to say name. So by doing this, we've looped through our array using the map function, and we are just displaying each name here. So we can come here and say, as you can see, the names are here. just like we have them in our array. So if we had an array of objects, we would be having in here like name dot object key, something like that. And if our array was numbers, we could still have it like this. If they were boolean, we could still use it to do something conditionally, or in any way we would use boolean in normal JavaScript. So let's proceed and also discuss about objects. As you can see, we have our object here of this employee. It's actually up here, it's called employee. We also have a typo. I think that's all. That's the right spelling, so we can proceed and use it. So in here, basically, when we have an object as a state variable, we can get to display the keys just as they are. So when we come down here in our JSX and we need to display it, we can come here and say, let's say div, and we can immediately consume it by just saying employee dot, let's say name. It was actually employee name, like that. Let's first check it out. As you can see, it's here. The employee name was John. It has just coincided with the names inside our array, but basically that was the employee name. We can also get to display other things in here. We can even say employee, like that, dot age. It's actually employee age. And we can also get to display this other ID. We can just have it like employee dot ID. Let's come here and check it out. As you can see, we have the ID missing, so it's actually employee ID, not just ID. Correct. Let's check it again. As you can see, that's all. John is 12 years old and the employee ID is 56. So basically that's how we use a useState hook in React. So that was just an overview of how we will use useState hook in React, and in our project we are going to be getting this skill to the test by writing a real world project that actually gets to use these things, having inputs in a form and getting to handle some other complex data. Of course, not complex, nothing is complex here. Even those big projects behind go, they are not complex at all. So we are going to be handling everything on a beginner setting, but of course understanding how everything is done. So in the next video, we are going to be handling the use effect. And if you really like these videos and would like to see more videos like these, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon. And I really want to appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.